So, Dick, you're from Real Fake Games, and I'm really curious about that name, Real Fake Games. Is that another edgy thing that you were talking about, or is it?
Edgy. I don't know if I'd go. I don't know if I'd label it edgy. So Real Fake Games was co-founded between me and my best friend V Lee.
Uh-huh.
We've been working in the video game industry together for nearly 10 years now. And
Cool.
and we've been theory crafting. Yeah, we worked on a PS5 AAA launch title called Godfall.
Uh-huh.
They were an animator. I was a producer. We were both very early in our careers when we kind of first jumped into that project, I suppose you could say. And we immediately hit it off. We were working in San Francisco at the time, and it was like best friendship at first sight, or whatever you would label that. We had immediate synergy and chemistry. And so for the last 4 years or so, more recently, we game together all the time, and we knew we wanted to create together. So, we had been kind of theory crafting game ideas, like I said, for probably the last 4 years or so. And over the past couple of years, we were like, hey, we should really kind of, take some steps to make this official, make this legitimate, and actually try to get one of these things out into the market instead of, on our local machines,
Right.
where we're just kind of goofing around. So, Real Fake Games, we're both, we like part of our, I guess, like a pillar of ours is, never to take ourselves too serious. We want to have fun with what we're doing. We want it to be wacky and whimsical and all these other things. Rick and Morty is a favorite show of ours. The content on Rick and Morty has slowed down, so it's not a center point of our hangouts these days. But at least at the time, it was. And for I don't know why we landed on it, but this idea of they have if you're not familiar with Rick and Morty, they have one of the bits of real fake doors, and it's just a guy who sells fake doors. And I don't know why we got obsessed with that joke. We just thought it was so funny. And again, this idea of making games that don't take themselves too serious, the idea that all of our games are real fake games. It just and then they came up with the logo, which is what pushed it over the top, which is like a fake unicorn. It's a horse who has a ice cream cone as its horn, and so it's like a fake so it's just again this idea. I don't know, it kind of it's like poking fun at imposter syndrome a little bit as well, which I think something as young professionals we both experienced. So that's kind of my rambly explanation as to how we stumbled our way into.
No worries.
Game.
I've seen it all. There's another company called, I think, Cheap Ass Games.
There you go. Sure.
So I mean, I'm like, where did you get that name from? So anyway, so you said this is more of a lighthearted game. Is it competitive? Is it co-op? Who's it for typically?
It is competitive. So the kind of the goal or design intent was to keep this game simple, accessible, but offer a lot of variance session to session, which I think in some ways that could almost be a cliche nowadays. I see a lot of games that label themselves that way. So I guess the way that I would ground that a little bit more is my background is, I've been a gamer my entire life, but I haven't necessarily always had, circles of gamers to play with. Sometimes it's, been quite a lonely journey where I don't necessarily see eye to eye with my peers, whether it be in school or, just the social circles I would find myself in. I never really found, a great, board game shop to hang out in growing up or things like that.
You're my people. Yeah. I'm the same way. I did a lot of solo gaming growing up just because I didn't really fit anywhere. So I completely understand.
Yeah, and I was very lucky. Like I had some great friends and everything, but when I would try to get them to, to take interest in my interests, there was a bit of a disconnect. So I have this, it's hard for me to find people to play Blood Rage with or Millennium Blades or all these kind of very, niche, hey, we got to take 30 minutes to learn the game and then it's going to be a 2-hour session. It's just, luckily now that I've recently moved to Nashville, I'm starting to kind of build that circle for really the first time in my adult life, which has been exciting and invigorating. But, I want to make games that scratch that itch and are able to achieve some of that, hardcore appeal to the hardcore crowds, I guess, is the best way I can put it. But something I can also bring back to my casual friends and my family and be like, hey, instead of playing, Catan or I don't know, Monopoly, let's try something a little different today. And so I was really inspired by games like Biblios and For Sale.
Okay.
Because it kind of dawned on me after trying to get friends and family to play games with me for so long. I was just playing For Sale one day at a local shop, and I was like, well, now wait a second, maybe I could get my family to play this, because it's kind of like Monopoly, and you do learn it very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, I was shocked. It became an instant hit at my family's game night. I was able to get friends and just everybody to play this game with me, and I was like, okay, well, now wait a second, there's something here.
Mm-hmm.
Biblios and For Sale, from an experience and fantasy perspective, they didn't really line up with what I like. I like fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Grew up on a lot of JRPGs. More recent modern examples would be like Undertale, of
Mm-hmm.
course, Final Fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, wow, what if there was like this kind of quick play bidding card game akin to a Biblios or For Sale, but with the fantasy and the experience that I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm also big on creature collectors, so some kind of like party manager as well appealed to me. And those were kind of the ingredients that organically came together that brought Quest Snakes to life, so to speak.
Cool. And how many people does it support? I'm guessing 6 based on the table here.
Yeah, 2 to 6 players.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted it to be enough where you could kind of get a big group involved, but I didn't want it to necessarily. I think like beyond 6, that those kind of games are well. So those audience sizes are well served by kind of your like deduction, exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I don't really need to go above 6. It felt pretty cozy.
Okay, cool. And how long does a game typically take to play?
So usually if you're in your first session where people are kind of still learning the flow of things, I found that it takes a little bit longer, probably closer to 45 minutes or so for your average session. But once you really get the hang of it, you should be able to get sessions in, probably 25 to 30 minutes, no problem.
Cool. So would you be able to sort of, I guess, give us a general overview of like what you're trying to do? Like how do you win and how a round typically plays or whatever is appropriate?
Yeah, absolutely. So the game is really simple, and it's broken up into 2 phases. The first phase is the bidding phase, and the second phase is the questing phase. So in this game, you take on the role of a wealthy guild leader, and your objective is to recruit 60 heroic snakes to join your guild, and essentially win the most quests with. So in phase 1, the bidding phase, let me go ahead and kind of spread some of these cards out, because I'd be doing a disservice if I didn't start showing off some of the the art itself. Yeah. So we got 60 completely unique snakes across different classes. Feel free to kind of poke around while I'm talking a little bit. I know you're a TTS pro, so I don't have to give you the typical hotkey overview that I normally give folks when we did.
Alt.
Yeah, exactly. Alt is your best friend.
Yes.
So during the bidding phase, the way it works is based on the number of players. So for example, with us being here together, it is a 2-player game. We would start with 1 player being the dealer, so they'd have the dealer crown token here, which I'll give to you. Matches your green mat. And you would deal pairs of snakes based on the number of players. So let's pretend that I didn't just ruin my deck, and let's pretend this is the top of the deck. You deal 1 pair, and you deal 2 pair. Okay, and then essentially we would start a bidding phase where we are essentially bidding for draft pick order. So whoever would win the bid would have first pick, whoever folds would have second pick. And then obviously this scales up with the number of players.
Okay.
Typical bidding rules: the players who fold are required to spend half of the coins they bid, and they get half of the coins back. Whoever wins the bid has to spend all their coins. So you kind of want to avoid being left with the one holding the bag, so to speak. The winner kind of has that detriment of they're spending, double or more than what everybody else had to spend. In some cases, if the top pair is really that much significantly better, it kind of works out. Other times, you can kind of burn through your currency very quickly if you're not careful.
Okay.
And you essentially go through 5 of these bidding phases. The reason we wanted to kind of have you bidding on pairs of snakes instead of individual snakes was to create, again, that session by session variance where you're never bidding on the same snakes. These pairs will always be unique. So it kind of leads to this dynamic decision making you have to make where it's like, oh, wow, this pair has one really strong snake that I want, but maybe one weaker or mid snake versus this pair is kind of more stable, so do I want to go for the 2 7 out of 10s or do I go for the 10 and the 2, so to speak? So you'll do that until you have your guild of 10 snakes. As far as the snakes themselves, there's a couple of key factors to focus in on. Snakes will be one of 3 classes. There'll be wizards, which are denoted by the kind of blue icon you see here.
Okay.
Warrior, which is the red icon, and rogues, which are the gray icon. Now, the classes themselves don't mean anything on their own, but the quests, as you might be kind of gathering here, will interact with unique snake abilities or quest conditions. As we go into the questing phase, I'll highlight some of that. But we actually have a great example here with how classes can interact with snake abilities with our the snake to the left here, Raging Rosa. Who every time she quests, you can see she has a unique ability denoted by the red snake icon in the bottom right corner. So every time Rosa goes on a quest, she buffs all the other warriors and herself in the party by 5 power. So this is just an example as to how the classes can be impacted by a snake ability, and then they're much more impacted by quest conditions as well.
Gotcha. And just as a quick aside question, do the backs, like this is a purple backed deck and that was a green backed deck, do they have any correlation to player color, or is that just those colors have nothing to do with the player colors?
Great question. Yeah, no, nothing to do with the player colors. The guild mats that you see here, the recovery mats, there's no, it's one of those, pick your favorite color things. There's no special abilities of the guild leaders.
Okay.
But really good question.
Gotcha. So the cards have no bearing on player color. Gotcha. Okay. Sounds good.
Yep. Yeah, the green back cards are your snake cards, and the purple back cards are your quest cards.
Gotcha.
Simple as that.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Yep, and the game comes with 60 snakes and 30 quests.
Okay, yeah. Cool.
Okay, so going back to the snakes, we talked about classes. The other two attributes that really matter with the snakes are their power. This is literally the strength of the snake. And then that blue value you see in the bottom left corner, which is the cooldown. Cooldown is the number of quests they have to wait after they've quested before they can quest again.
Okay.
So, for example, if you were to deploy Rosa here on a quest, after that quest is completed, she would be brought to your recovery mat at the 2 slot. And then after each quest, she moves 1 slot to the left until she's off the mat, in which case, sorry, some weird TTS thing going on there. Keeps moving to the left until she goes off the mat, in which case she goes back to your hand and is ready to be deployed on another quest.
Gotcha. Okay. Now that makes sense. So that's what this mat is. It's a recovery area, and the numbers above each slot determine the number of turns that they would need to refresh.
Exactly.
Okay. Gotcha.
And typically the more powerful the snake, the longer the cooldown. So again, there's a little bit of a resource / party manager here where you don't necessarily want to go all in on every single quest because you could lose some very valuable resources for an extended period of time. So you have to be really particular with when you're deploying your snakes and when you're kind of holding back, so to speak.
Okay, so the first part of the game is just simply drafting snakes, and you're going to have a hand of cards, I assume, after it's all said and done. And then, okay, gotcha.
Yep, after the bidding phase, you'll have a hand of 10 snakes of varying power, varying cooldowns, ideally varying classes. We encourage new players, before you have any kind of strategy, before you've seen all the different quests and you can kind of anticipate what you're going to need, it's good to have you're going to want some warriors, some rogues, and some wizards. But then once people get a little bit more experience with the game, they kind of craft their own strategy. I'm going to really target and prioritize, rogues over X, Y, or Z.
Now, can you see the quests ahead of time so that you can kind of plan what snakes to get? Or are the quests just like, no, everyone's going in blind and, you just...
Everyone... Okay. Great question. Everyone's going in blind. Okay. Everyone's going in blind. So as you play the game more, you'll know what kind of quests are obviously within the deck. So there's 30 cards in total. A typical adventure is going to go through 10 quests. So you typically will go through 1/3 of the total quest. So again, as you get familiar with them, you have a good idea of what's out there, but what you actually encounter, there's some RNG aspect to that. And part of that comes from the influence of, I'm a big roguelite fan. I'm a huge fan of, Slay the Spire, Hades, all the greats, and then some more like niche ones as well. So I wanted there to be some of that, sometimes it feels really delightful when it pays off. Oh, I purposely drafted a bunch of warriors and we got the warrior quest, so I'm going to dominate. My strategy came to fruition. Versus other times where it's like, oh, I drafted all the warriors, we didn't see any warrior quests. My goal and my hope with the design is that even when let's say you kind of draft towards one strategy, even if you don't roll the ideal quest for that strategy, it doesn't feel bad. Like the snakes and the strategy that you form should be strong enough on its own that any game is winnable. But when that magical moment happens where the stars align and your strategy is perfectly executed and you see the exact quest you want, it just fills you with joy and delight.
Okay, so once everyone has drafted snakes, so how does this phase 2 quest part happen? Like,
Yeah, great question. So we'll kind of move the snakes up a little bit here in
okay.
case we want to poke around and talk more about more of their abilities in a little bit. But once we both have 10 snakes, we move into the questing phase. So naturally, we would deal out 10 quest cards, but just for the sake of kind of demoing here, I'm going to kind of spread things out a little bit so we can, again, appreciate the art and see things a little bit more holistically. But we essentially start our questing phase. Like I mentioned, in your average adventure, if you're trying to hit that, 25 to 30 minute playtime, we like the standard rules are 10 quests. But this is kind of Mario Party style in the sense that if you want a shorter adventure, it's totally valid to do a 5 quest adventure. If you want, if everybody's kind of buckled in, they've got their beers and they want a longer session, tee up 20 quests. Why not? That's all kind of explained in the rule books of how you can kind of create those variant game modes, if you will, or extend your session.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah, so 10 quests will be dealt at random from the deck, and then there will still be a dealer. So the dealer token continues to go clockwise around the table, both through the bidding phase and the drafting phase. And when we start the questing phase, we'll deal, 1 quest. So let me kind of move things out of the way, and let's pretend, for example, the dungeon boss is what's. I've already made a mess of our board here, but let's say the dungeon boss is what's dealt out here. So you were the dealer for dungeon boss. Every quest is going to have some variables you want to keep in mind here. I'll first look at the numbers at the bottom. So the bottom left green value is the max party size for the quest. This is the maximum number of snakes you can deploy from your hand into your party. So in this case, you can put up to 4 snakes on this quest. You don't have to deploy the maximum number of snakes, but you are required to deploy at least 1 snake on every single quest.
Okay.
Why does that matter? Well, imagine you're playing at a table of 6 players, and starting from the dealer, starting left of the dealer, everyone one by one is going to start playing their party face down. So the pink player to the left of you, they put 4 snakes down. I, as the blue player, I put 4 snakes down. Maybe 1 or 2 other players also put 4 in. By the time it gets back to you, you're like, wow, there are 3 or 4 guild leaders at the table who are really going all in to win this quest. They're putting 4 snakes in. You're accounting for the fact if I put 4 snakes in, that's 4 snakes that are going to have to hit the recovery mat. I won't be able to use on future quests until they get off the recovery mat. There's already a lot of people contesting this. Maybe it's best for me to sit this one out. So instead, I'm just going to deploy 1 snake, or maybe I'll deploy 1 or 2 snakes if I have a couple snakes that like specialize in sabotaging, so I have a little bit of power to manipulate the board here. And I'll kind of sit this one out. I'll manage my resources, and I'll go in when there are less people at the table competing for it. So that's why that minimum of 1 snake, maximum of 4 snake matters.
Okay, makes sense. And can you contribute 1 snake, and then when it comes back to your turn again, you can add another snake, or do you have to? It's an all or nothing. You have to put 3 in if you want to put 3 in. It has to be done now.
Great question. It's all or nothing. You have to put it in at the moment that it's your turn.
Okay.
But naturally that balances itself out, right? Because everybody gets a chance to be dealer at the table at least once, if not twice. So you'll always kind of get the chance to be the last one and be able to scope things out.
Okay, makes sense.
And then in the bottom right, we have your golden mice. And essentially think of these as points. Quests are all or nothing. So whatever snake party has the most power, they win the quest and they get that golden mice value. So whoever wins it would essentially kind of add the quest to their mat to track it. And then at the end, everybody will count the total golden mice they won from the quests they earned. And whoever has the highest point value wins.
Okay. Are there any consolation prizes, or is it just whoever has the most and that's it?
So there are consolation prizes for second. Second place gets to determine the pick order for the next game, and then we encourage folks, if they're going to do multiple sessions within a single play session. There's a scoring system. So think of it maybe like a like a fantasy sport, or if you're familiar with auto battlers, it's kind of like, if you get first place, you get 4 points, you get second, you get 3, so on and so forth. And then after 3 sessions, you see who kind of earned the most points based on their placement across multiple sessions, if that makes sense.
Okay, no, that makes sense. And I'm noticing that some of these cards have different symbols in the bottom middle, like one's a crown, one's like a monster face. Does that have anything to do with special abilities or different card effects, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So we mostly added those for flavor. Those are the quest classification. So in the rule book, we clarify, it's like a boss fight versus an adventure versus King's Favor, so on and so forth. I do have some intent. I ultimately decided not to do anything with the game design perspective. I wanted to strike a balance between actual functionality versus things that are just there for flavor. In our rule book, we have a variant of the game where you actually don't you don't do any of the math, you don't do any of the kind of like stat tracking, and instead it's a completely like role playing mode where there's a single quest master who's flipping over quests, and people are creating stories of how their snakes go on the adventure and how they would win it, and the quest master decides who like puts the best story together. So we wanted to incorporate some flavor elements like that, so people could be like, oh, this is a boss fight versus this is an adventure. Kind of helps that storytelling aspect of the game, adds a little bit of flavor. That being said, if we ultimately pursue expansions with the game down the line, I do think it would be kind of interesting with expansions where you kind of have that liberty to increase the design complexity. I would probably create snake abilities that have interesting interactions with these quest classifications.
Cool.
So they could mean something down the line, but for now, they're flavor.
Okay, awesome. Before I forget to ask, is there a solo mode where you're trying to compete for the best score, or is that something that you're thinking about implementing? Or
I'm so glad that you asked this. I know from your other videos, you're like, it's Kickstarter, guys. So, you know,
I always ask.
Things are subject to change. It's constantly evolving.
Yes.
So I have been really inspired by solo RPG experiences recently. Actually, literally on my desk right now, on top of my Quest Snake box, is a great book by, if you don't mind me just giving it a shout out, What Lies Beneath, by Chris Scafidi, if I'm saying that right. I'm probably not. But anyways, I just got it on Drive-Thru RPG a few weeks back by a friend's recommendation. And point being, I've been really into these like solo RPG adventures recently. And so I do intend for the launch of Kickstarter, working with Drive-Thru RPG, we will do a solo RPG adventure for Quest Snakes that will be compatible with the game, and essentially allow you to use your cards, use your snakes to kind of go on an adventure, create a guild and a solo experience, and again have kind of that roguelite. Whereas a lot of solo RPGs I've been playing, it's kind of D&D style, right, where your own character, you're either like dungeon crawling or doing something like that. My twist and kind of what I want to put into the mix a little bit is more of a creature collector guild manager, where you're the guild leader. As you go through the pages, as you go through the solo adventure, you're assembling your guild, and there are different achievements you could hit throughout the adventure to unlock new snakes to like for future playthroughs, so on and so forth. So it's a fairly long-winded and rambly way of saying like, yes, there will be a solo way to play. It's probably a new idea hot off the press. Basically, like 2 weeks ago, I was like, yep, we're going to commit to this. It's completely optional. I suspect we'll kind of have it as an add-on to the Kickstarter. I'll also ensure that the book itself has an appendix where even if you don't own the card game Quest Snake, you'll still be able to play with just the book. And really the cards themselves will just kind of enhance the feel of the experience. But, they can be enjoyed together.
That's cool.
Yeah. So, anyways, it's funny that you bring that up. I didn't think you would ask about solo play, but
I always do. You'd be surprised how many people are into like solo modes. I mean, I guess it makes sense because whether they have a significant other that doesn't play games or they live by themselves, whatever, most people buy games if they have a solo mode. So I had to ask.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like we were talking about earlier, right? Like sometimes it's just hard to find those people, and right. that was part of my inspiration with like as I was playing What Lies Beneath, I was like, I've played solo games before. I don't know why this one resonated as much. It is really well done, and it scratches that dungeon itching fantasy, so it like perfect timing kind of thing. But it just like filled me with inspiration. I was like, yeah, there's no reason to not do this for Quest Snakes, and I immediately had the vision of like, wow, it'd be so cool to have like a solo guild leader adventure, and you're like drawing different snakes, and you're assembling like a semi-random guild as you go through the pages and the different encounters. And I was just like, oh my god, yeah, this has to exist. I am committed to making this happen.
Well, you mentioned earlier about things being subject to change. Is there anything like that is still being worked on? Like, is the art 100% done? Are you still like deciding on different things?
Great question. Yeah, we've been playtesting this game since probably the earliest playtest, honestly, was last December. It was really cool. V Lee, my co-founder, they were visiting for Christmas. We were having a bit of a friend miss, and they actually had the art idea for Quest Snakes well before the design existed. Again, we were constantly jamming on game ideas, right? So they had sent me just images of snakes wearing medieval outfits, and I was like, dude, that is freaking hilarious. Like, I love everything about this. So we had been sitting on that idea for probably like over a year. We kind of had this idea of like, oh, would it be cool? It's like a mobile game where you can create your own party of snakes and customize them a lot. But again, the scope of something like that for just 2 people to pull off is incredibly high.
Right.
And so I knew they were coming into town for Christmas, and I just like wrote on some note cards like the first 30 snakes basically, and we played it. We started our first play test there that Christmas, and immediately V and my fiance, they were like, oh yeah, this is very fun. We need to actually make this happen. Cool. So we've been aggressively playtesting it for over 5-6 months now at this point. Weekly playtest on TTS. We've been very fortunate that like very close friends and reviewers have started hopping in with us in playtesting as well in the last couple of months. So this is a long-winded way of saying that the design is locked in. Okay. Maybe for like we've already done our reviewer print, so we have 20 copies of the game that exist that we feel very good about, that were done through a digital printer. So they're not perfect production quality, but they're pretty damn good. I'm proud of it.
Good.
At this point, the changes that we would make would be based on reviewers. If they were like, hey, maybe tweak a number here or there, some edits to the rule books, some small suggestions like that, sure. But otherwise, I would say the game design is like 95 to 99% locked in at this point, and I feel very good about the balance of the game. And then the other side of it is, you asked art. Art, I would say is 95% locked in as well. I will admit, us working, I don't know how like familiar you and how much you dabble in like color theory and all this crap that we have to worry about with manufacturing. But oh, go ahead.
Well, no, I'm more of a game critic and I've never actually done my own project through Kickstarter. So I'm sure there's an entire process behind the manufacturing thing that I have no idea exists. So yeah.
Color theory is tough. That's the long and short of it. Yeah. So V works in RGB all the time. When we partnered with our amazing manufacturers, What's Games, they were kind of coaching us through CMYK and how to, transfer color profiles. And the long and short of it is when we moved to CMYK, when we kind of met all the standards that had to be met for their printers, we felt as though some of the magic behind some of the art was a little bit lost. They look really good here on TTS because we're able to use the like pre-color graded, I guess you would say, version of the art. They look good in person. I'm looking at the physical deck for the beta kit right now, and it looks really good. But card art that has a lot of like blues and silvers and grays in it, we lost a little bit of the pop, a little bit of the line work on those. So I say that the artwork is probably like closer to 95% done, because we know that before we go into full production, once we get to the end of the Kickstarter and everything, during the Kickstarter we'll be refining. We'll just be kind of revisiting that line work and getting it just right in the proper CMYK file, just to make sure that the players get the best version of the game once it goes into full production. So the actual card design and the idea behind the artwork, the theme and everything, that's not going to change. It's just going to improve on the margins as we continue to polish.
Cool. As far as the Kickstarter is concerned, I think you'd mentioned you were looking at August or September. Is that still the expected date or estimated date?
Yeah, and we'll definitely by the time this video goes live, we'll have our official date locked in. There's a lot of variables at play. I would if I had to kind of make a call, we're probably looking mid-September, late September at this point. And the reason for that is we want to make sure that the reviewers that we're partnered with have plenty of time to get the product. Some of them, they live outside of the US, so it's taking 7 to 10 days to get there. Right. And, they want to have, 4 to 8 weeks to, make something really special for the game, so on and so forth. So for that reason and where things kind of like landed, mid to late September is what we're looking at right now. And that'll give us plenty of time to make sure that we're doing our due diligence on making the art the best it can be, building up a community around it. We've been very active on TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, you name it. So we're just going to use that the extra couple of weeks we are getting from kind of delaying late August to late September to just make it the experience the best it can be.
Cool. And some developers restrict the game to Kickstarter only, like you can never find it in retail after the fact. Is your game going to be like Kickstarter only, or will you have extra production copies after the fact for retail, or do you have any insight into that?
Yeah, I definitely want it to be. I mean, again, one of the pillars is accessibility. So I think to make it just a Kickstarter exclusive would be a disservice to really the goal of the product, which is something that any and everyone can enjoy. I don't, I think like maybe it's sacrilege with Kickstarter in some ways to not like try to min max every little bit of FOMO that you can. I certainly want there to be benefits and perks and exciting moments for people who are backing us early, because those are our super fans. They're people who are making this dream a reality for us, and I do want there to be a reward there for those people, but at the same time I don't want that to create a sense of FOMO that gives people anxiety, or that like when people find out they kind of miss the window, that like that upsets them, or is perceived as a negative thing. So it is a really delicate balance, because you really need to take care of the people who, again, like the Kickstarter backers are the folks who make this dream reality. Without them,
exactly.
I go bankrupt, and then this is the end of Real Fake Games, so to speak. So I do really want to make sure that they're well taken care of and they get some awesome stuff. We're looking at like Kickstarter exclusives. I think also discounts are great, right? Because at the end of the day, like we cut a couple of bucks off here, and then thank you for your early support. Maybe we can throw a couple of extra Kickstarter exclusive cards in. But there will definitely be retail copies. I plan to work with a distributor, Bridge Distribution, out of Atlanta, Georgia. They're amazing. I've been chatting with them since the GAMA Expo, I believe, back in March. They're great partners. They come highly recommended from some seasoned veterans in the space who I've worked with in the past. So I know that we're in good hands with them, and they'll make sure that we're covered on the brick and mortar side for sure.
Cool. Well, I mean, you answered my question regarding exclusives. So was there anything else that we didn't touch on that you do want to touch on?
We funny enough, this would have I should have slotted this in when we were talking about the quest cards, but I'll loop back to it just to there is one other element to quest, and I kind of alluded to this already, so maybe this gets cut out of the final video if it's not relevant. But every quest does have a unique condition, kind of a twist, if you will. So the dungeon boss here that we drew, for example, in order for you to win and qualify your party to qualify to win this quest, you have to have at least a minimum of 60 power, and these effects can get pretty wacky. One of my favorite examples is Crisscross here that I just pulled out, where the player who wins this quest, they get 3 golden mice, which 3 is the most points that a quest can give you. So 3 is very high, 1 is very low. It's a bell curve. They're the most quests offer 2, so on and so forth. So to be able to get 3 points for just 2 snakes is great value for your snakes. But the twist here with this quest is if you're the winning player, you have to swap your party with another player at the table. So like if you put your best snakes out there in this, you could potentially you will lose them to somebody else who ultimately lost the quest. So you see here, there's lots of like twists and turns and wacky shit that can happen with the different quests. And then, like I mentioned, Dungeon Rage is just a good classic example of how classes can matter. With the quests, where this is in order to win this quest, you have to send 3 snakes in, and your party must contain a warrior, a wizard, and a rogue. So again, this is where having a diverse cast of classes in your guild is really important. Otherwise, you might not even be able to fight for this quest. If you, for example, all your rogues on the recovery mat, well, you're kind of crap out of luck. You literally can't. So you kind of get it.
Makes sense. And I guess I missed this part. How many coins do you get for your bidding process? And do you ever get coins back, or is it like 8-Minute Empire where you just get this many coins at the beginning of the game, and if you are out of coins and it's still the bidding phase, you're out of luck?
Yeah, so if you run out of coins, you're out of luck. Right now on TTS, we have you starting with 16 coins.
Okay.
We are currently testing a version of the game where you have, just making sure I don't misspeak here. Oh, no, actually, yeah, no, we locked in 16. Okay, yeah, so I was just looking at the rulebook really quick to make sure I didn't misspeak. But yeah, 16 coins. I mean, like I mentioned before, you do get half of your bid back, rounding down, whenever you fold. So if you're not the winner of the round, if you had 3 coins out and you fold, you spend 2, you get 1 back. But otherwise, there's no way to get those coins back. And then funny enough, you're asking about like the design getting locked in. The last change that we made to the game, and this did feel like we were making this change in the 11th hour, the point of feedback we were constantly getting in playtests, like we really tightened up the design. The game's obviously, I'm sure you can imagine, gone through many iterations. There were too many snakes with abilities, and now there's too few snakes with abilities. So now we hit it just right finally. One of the last points of feedback that we knew we needed to address was, and I think this can be the case for a lot of bidding games, or at least some that is like, why not just go all in on the last round, right? Like I've got 5 coins left. Why don't I just push my bag to the table and see if anybody can match me? And we were really unsatisfied with this pattern where, like, the last round everybody would just go all in, so players could get screwed based on their seating positioning. It's like if the guy next to you has 9 coins left and you've only got 5, you're forced to fold. That doesn't feel good, and there's no strategy to it. So we really wanted to account for that, but we didn't want to just create a mechanic for the sake of a mechanic. We wanted it to be thematic. We wanted it to kind of make sense. So we added a rule at the very, very end here, where any coins you have left over after phase 1 going into phase 2, after every single quest, you can opt to spend a coin to basically like buy healing medicine for your snake and reduce its cooldown by an additional 1. So you can only do this once per quest, so you can do it up to 10 times in a game. So it never benefits you to hoard more than 10 coins. And frankly, if you're hoarding 10 coins, you're probably losing every draft. But once per turn, you can essentially spend a coin, accelerate the cooldown of your snakes a little bit. So it does give you that decision. You're in the 5th bidding phase. You're in the 5th and final bidding phase. You have 6 coins left. Do I really want to go all in, or do I want to hold a couple of these so I can accelerate some of my most valuable snakes and get them off recovery faster? So really, really happy with how that rule landed. And again, it's a way to kind of make those coins mean something beyond just phase 1.
Awesome. Well, is there anything else before I let you go?
I think that covers it. I appreciate you taking the time to let me talk your ear off about quest snakes.
I don't mind. Board games, video games, whatever. I love doing this. So it's a lot of fun seeing different developers come up with different ideas about different things, and then recognizing bits and pieces from this and bits and pieces from that, and integrating these two things in a way that I've never seen before. Like, it's really cool seeing these new ideas come to light like this. And there you have it, folks. Hopefully you enjoyed that. The rest of the interview was just simply back-end stuff that probably won't interest you. But if you are interested in checking out this project further, I'll put some links in the below description for you. Mainly the Kickstarter page here. It's not available yet, but you can click on the Notify Me at Launch button and sign up to be notified when it does actually launch. So with that being said, this is Vince. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all next time. Take care.